Hey Reese, thanks for joining me today.
Of
How
course.
are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
No, I'm so happy that you came on because I think that this is such an important topic, seriously, and especially right now because there's only a few days left to even vote at all. And I just kind of want people to hear from somebody with legitimate experience why it's so important. Like, why is it important to vote, especially right now, and why does it matter that you vote? And I just want to mention, at some point, why you should stay in line, because I think that that's something that a lot of people are, concerned about. Like, what if I get in line and then they close? Should I stay? What if the wait is 2 hours? What's going on with COVID? Things like that. But first, I want to talk about you and like tell us what it's like to be the governor's daughter. Do you ever feel, pressure from that at all?
Yeah, so I honestly tend to keep my family life like pretty private, but I will say that, I couldn't have ever asked for a better dad. He taught me all these principles. I have so much integrity because of him. He's taught me so much and is altogether, a really great person and a really great role model that I've been lucky enough to grow up with and know. But one of the most important things my dad has taught me is, to kind of be my own person, and have my own views. And I would say that any pressure I do feel is pressure from me internally. It's never like really an outside pressure more than anyone else would feel, especially in today's political climate and actual climate. So, things are changing and happening fast, and obviously we all have to act fast. But I think, feeling a little bit of pressure is never bad, but I would never say that it's, at least personally, too out of the ordinary. So,
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that your dad kind of raised you to have your own views. I think of many politicians, we see them stick pretty hard with their party, but actually, your dad, as I mentioned in your intro, this election has backed Joe Biden. And so that's really important because, we have these two parties, and I think people feel that they always have to stick with their affiliated parties, even if they don't really agree with what they're doing. So that's just a good example of that we don't have to do that. And it's great that he's like instilling those values in you. But, as far as like kind of being in the spotlight, especially, I'm from Ohio. So growing up, I knew who you were before I really even met you in person. Is it hard to like make friends? What's that like with everybody knowing who you are before they even meet you?
yeah, so I grew up going to the same school my whole life. So it's, my dad was elected when I think I was 10 years old. And, so the kids I grew up with, like throughout all my teenage years, they kind of just went along the ride with us. And then when I went to college, I have been lucky enough to meet a lot of great people, and I'm in a tight, close knit group of friends, and, no one ever treats me differently.
So, it's a little bit different living in Chicago, I'm sure. But in this election specifically, those who didn't know your dad, who are out of state, in Illinois, definitely do now, because I think his backing of Joe Biden kind of rocked everybody a little bit and made him like super well known and kind of a household name. Um, but it's important because he really talks about what he's passionate about. And that's important, especially now, to hear from politicians about what matters to them and why they are affiliated with the party that they are in this election and elections past. So I just kind of want to hear from you, like, what's something currently going on that you're passionate about?
Yeah, so I would say, to kind of like go off what you were saying earlier, one thing I am really proud of my dad for is sticking with, his beliefs and not necessarily the party's beliefs, because, he always says, the party's my vehicle, not my master. And that's something I hear him say so often. It's just stuck in my head. But I think it is important to remember that you can kind of sway from your party and you can still belong to your party. Because I think people a lot of times are like, oh, well, that's not what a Republican thinks, or that's not what a Democrat thinks. But it doesn't really matter. You just need to, like, back your beliefs and why you actually believe them. But I would say, probably the thing that I have been most passionate about as of, a few years now is climate change and sustainability. I'm actually at a school club. One of my friends started it last year, where we just like kind of go over sustainability specifically in fashion, as I am a fashion major. But it is kind of applicable to all areas of business and everything. Like it's everywhere. But yeah, I don't know. I would just say that like honestly, it's really important for people to join clubs and groups about things that they are passionate about as well. Even if that just means, you know, getting a handful of friends together and starting a book club like about religion or like I said, the environment or something. I just think it's very important for people to be engaged and kind of taking action on things that they care about. And I kind of try to live by that. And luckily my school has given me an opportunity to be able to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that works both ways. Like, first of all, climate change is a huge topic of debate right now with politics, but also, I mean, you are in fashion, and as somebody who comes from like a big fashion family, I know that people who are really passionate about fashion specifically are often passionate about the environment and sustainability because the fashion industry is a huge contributor of, you know, what's going on with our climate right now. So that's awesome that you've kind of combined the two interests and joined a club and have been active. I think that's super on brand with why it's important to vote. It's being active in the things you want to see in the world. You know, you want to see some reform for climate change, so you join a club, just like, you know, those who want to see reform for climate change should vote. And going off of that, you know, I want to hear from you. Why do you think that it's so important to vote, especially this year of all years?
Well, I would say honestly, the main bullet point here is because if you don't vote for your own interests, then who will? Nobody's going to vote for you. You know what you think, you know what you want. Nobody's going to go out of their way and do that for you because everyone has their own opinion. And I think people, especially young people, since we are the lowest voting turnout, you know, vote to influence issues that are going to affect our lives for years to come, whether we realize it or not. You know, I think like we talked about earlier with climate change, I think that's the greatest example. What you vote for is like, it's so time sensitive because especially for this election, whoever we vote into office this year, they're going to be kind of the ones to determine what happens with the climate because we only have like 7 years left before it's too late to kind of turn things back. So if our president doesn't kind of kick things into action, and kind of, you know, America is a leader of a lot of things. If we don't lead on climate change, who's going to do that? And, you know, I would say that when you are not voting, you are not only misrepresenting yourself, you're misrepresenting your entire demographic. And that's huge. But, you know, I would also say that there are way too many people that aren't fully equipped to vote critically for their own self-interests. And it is important, you know, for people to remember that, you know, what's good for them and what's good for their future, you need to vote for it, and it needs to be long-term. You know, it's also easier than ever to be an educated voter. You get on Instagram once and you see 3 infographics about why this person's good, why this person's bad, why you should do this, why you shouldn't do that. You don't have an excuse to not really be educated at this point. And I think this is like kind of a stereotypical answer, but, you know, we have like one of the basic things about America is our right to vote.
Yeah.
And so many people don't get that. And it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. It's kind of like, don't waste that, especially in this time. You know, we all need to be heard. We all want to be heard. It's important. And it's not just all about you. People are relying on you to vote because people are losing their rights. People are having a hard time right now. And unless we all work together to change that, and even if you know, at the end of the day, if things don't turn out how you wanted them to turn out with your voting and everything, with who is chosen, you know, it's still a democracy. It still happened. Like, I don't know. I think no matter what, you have to, if you want an opinion, you have to be able to say that you participated. So if, you know, like I said, if things don't turn out the way certain people want them to turn out, you know, I'm kind of a big believer in, you know, please don't complain unless you had something to contribute. So I would also say that's another reason why it's important to kind of stay in line and just to vote, period.
Yeah, I mean, you had like so many good points in there. So I just kind of want to like reel it back for a second, because I do think that that was a very well thought out answer that touched on a lot of things. I mean, first of all, you're absolutely right. If you aren't practicing, voting when you are able to, then you really should not be complaining about what happens, because you had the opportunity to do it and you chose not to. Second of all, you mentioned,
It sounds harsh, but like it's
no,
true.
but it is true, because it's just as you said, people fought for this. People fought for our right as women to vote, people of color to vote. Like, after all these years of trying, if you're able to, you really should, if you want to see change, unless you're like, I don't care one way or another,
But even
which
then,
is hard.
you should still be voting, even if you say
Right.
it doesn't really affect me. Well, it affects your neighbor.
Well,
So,
that's what I was going to say was, you said vote for yourself and the things that you want to see, but I also think you should be voting for what you want in to see in your loved ones. Like, for example, I could go to the polls and be like, I want, this specific thing from this specific candidate, but what's also in my mind is like, how is this going to affect my best friend who might be, you know, African American, or who might be LGBTQ? How is this going to affect them? That's really important, because it is more than just about you. And I also think that, you know, bringing it back to people fought for this, they did fight for this for the exact reason that you were saying. We think short term. We think, okay, this person's getting elected, they're going to be here for 4 years, 8 years, whatever. But it's, as you said, the decisions that they make during their term really impact everything else. I mean, what Obama did before Trump impacted what Trump was left with and has done. What Trump is doing now will impact, his next term or Biden's term. And after that, it's going to affect the next generation. And when we have these really big things weighing on us, one of those being climate change, where we are running out of time, to make this change, that's why I think that elections are so important right now, because you might not be able to say in the next election, I'm voting for climate change. It might be too late.
I would also say, look at where America was, where the world was 5 years ago, and then look where we are now. It's not even just like politics and policies, it's a mindset, it's emotions. It's think about how much more aggressive things are now than they were 4 or 5 years ago. So, sometimes you're not just voting for policies, you're voting for how people treat each other and what's okay. What you're endorsing a person, you're also endorsing, when you vote, you're endorsing a person, you're also endorsing how they act and how they behave. I think people often are like, well, no, I'm not, like, I'm just agreeing with a certain policy they have or how they think financially. It's like, no, you're saying that this person is able to hold the highest office in the land, who you're actually endorsing, and what kind of attitude you're saying is okay, and what you're saying is okay for yourself to behave as, your friends to behave as, your family to behave as. So it's not just a president. The president doesn't just do things for the economy. They're also like they should be like one of the biggest role models there is.
To discussion, the media, and you talked about being an informed voter, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, people might be listening to this and saying, okay, I get on Instagram and I see 3 infographics, but like, how do you determine what's real and what's fake news? But I really don't think it matters about being real or fake news, because the fact that you saw it, if it brought anything to mind, you should be doing research on these different things. And I think that, as you said, it's about being a role model now more than ever versus just policies, because when a big public figure is doing something crazy, what people are seeing is it's okay to do that crazy thing. And I think that it's kind of been the first time in history that it's like back to back to back to back crazy things that are happening, to the point where like nobody even knows what to talk about anymore. I mean, this is so random, but it's just like brings it to mind. 2020 has screwed us in so many ways, that I saw that the government released something about like potential, like legitimate UFOs, and people just didn't even talk about it. They were like, yep, this makes sense.
Dad was just on Jimmy Kimmel the other day, and they were talking about everything that went wrong in 2020. And my dad was like, and the worst of all, Meghan and Harry, Megxit. It's the worst. So,
Yeah, it's just like these big things that 5 years ago would have like shaken us to our core is just another day in 2020. An unbiased thing to say would be a pandemic hitting is not something that anybody can fully control, and that is unfortunate that it was given at this time. However, it is not, we are not judged on what happens to us, but instead how we handle it. And I just hope everybody really keeps that in mind going forward.
I think it's very important to look at multiple medias. Don't believe something just because, oh, Fox News said it.
I do think that the most important thing just to talk about in general is, regardless, it is your right to vote. People have fought for this right and you should use it. There are countries that don't have this right, and we do. We're very lucky for that reason. And if we want to see a better future, then we need to vote for that better future.
It kind of goes hand in hand with people saying, well, is my vote even going to count, with the whole election rigging? And that is a very dangerous game to play. And it's a very unreal game to play. So I feel like, no matter what, I would just say, like, vote. You know what I mean? It's just a very dangerous game people are playing here by saying that. Because when you say, like, oh, well, your vote's not going to count, or we're not going to accept this election, the election outcomes, it's like, okay, well, then why are we voting? But right. I would say, like, that's not something to be, like, scared about. Our country has set up this, like, act in a way where it's done correctly. There's very little, I don't think there's a very, like, solid way to really screw an election. You know what I mean? So
totally. I mean, we're definitely living in crazy times and nobody really knows how to handle everything. But I do think that everybody is very invested in this election on both parties. And I don't think that they're going to let their affiliated party, get blamed for a rigging or not counting of votes. So I really do have faith that everything is going to work out the way that it's supposed to as far as voting. And with that being said, don't let anybody, media source or candidate tell you that your vote is not going to count.
Yeah, or scare you into thinking that, because
correct.
That's not what leaders do. What leaders do is, we're going to work out whatever happens, like, we're in this together. And if something does go wrong, then we're going to work together as a team to figure it out. We're going to come together on both sides and figure it out. But I don't think that's something anyone should be scared of. And I think that is deterring a lot of people from voting.
Absolutely. So vote, everyone. It's very important, and your vote will count as long as you get it in time. I know a lot of states have closed down their mail-in voting. So you might have to go to the polls at this point, but if you're in line, just so everybody knows, if they close down the polling center and you are in line, they will still allow you to vote. If you mess up your ballot, ask for a new one. Things like this are not reasons to deter you from voting. That's really all I have to say. If you requested an absentee ballot in most states, you have to fill out the absentee ballot. But that differs by state, I know. So you should check with your local state, and I'll provide some links in the description that allow people to like figure out all of these things for themselves. But I know that this has been like a super heavy conversation. We're living in a heavy time. So I just kind of want to talk about something light. I always like to end with a fun question. So my question for you is, what is your favorite coffee shop in either Chicago or Columbus, and why?
There's a bagel shop in Columbus, the Locke's Bagel Store, I believe.
Yep.
That place is good.
What's so funny about them, though, is that they actually are the bagel provider for my all-time favorite restaurant literally ever, which is Bagel Street Deli in Athens, where I went to school at OU. And they provide the bagels for them. So I agree with that 100%. I think that they're amazing. So I hear that you have some good news to share with me.
Yes, my friends and I have started a little book exchange. We kind of decided, there's only so much Netflix you can really watch in COVID season. So we're just kind of doing a little book exchange thing where you sign up and then you kind of share this infographic on your Instagram or Snapchat, and then you just send books. It's you send one book and you receive many, and it just goes around and around and around. And we're just really excited to do it. So we started it last week. And yeah, so it's just going to be really nice to kind of learn some things and then also have a few books to kind of relax with, especially as it gets colder. So yeah, if anyone wants to join, they're more than welcome to look at my Instagram and get involved.
Oh yeah, I'll cheers to that. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about this super important topic. I'm going to be giving everybody your information, and at the end of this video, I'm going to post that infographic in case anybody wants to join the book club, book exchange, and just make sure you guys vote. It's so important.
Of course. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, for sure.